Welcome to WholeCEO with Lisa G. I'm the best-selling author of The Boss Weight Loss. I'm bringing you the top tips to be unstoppable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually pull up a chair with today's top experts in mindset, weight loss, business, and more. Learn our top tips so that you can have more energy, be fit and resilient, feel unstoppable, unshakable, and unbreakable. So excited to welcome my next guest who believes the single most effective way to sell anything to anyone is be a problem solver, a problem finder, not a product pusher. This philosophy has made him one of the wealthiest sales professionals on the planet. In his 17-year sales career, he's been recognized in the direct selling industry as the 45th highest earning producer out of more than 108 million salespeople selling anything worldwide. His commission-only earnings were in the multiple seven figures every year. He's a chairman of Seventh Level, a global sales training, which was ranked #1 fastest growing sales training company in the USA in 2020 and in 2021 by Inc. magazine, Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies. His brand of sales training pioneers the unique use of behavioral science and human psychology with the sales process from his studies on the subject from Utah Valley University. The scientific method of selling he created has helped over 393,000 and counting salespeople in 37 countries over the last 3 years to 3x, 5x, even 10x their sales results. Contributor to Inc. magazine's been featured in Forbes, USA Today, Entrepreneur Magazine, Wall Street Journal, a host of other publications on the topic of sales persuasion and the role of psychology and human behavior in the buying process. Co-authored a new book, The New Model of Selling to Unsellable Generation. Welcome to the podcast, Jeremy Miner.
Wow, Lisa, that was a really long introduction. I appreciate it. I'm gonna take all that as a compliment because my kids say I'm pretty boring. So thank you very much. And I've got a really bad head cold, but I did not want to miss this. So if I sound weird, my voice is crazy. It's just because yesterday I was like in bed all day and I'm like, oh my gosh, but I'm like 30-40% better today. So we should be good. We should be good, 100%.
Well, I'm so glad to have you here. Now that I know you're sick, we'll jump right into the content. I normally don't even introduce people to that length, but I was so impressed. I feel like everything is sales. So why is it important for someone to have the ability to sell in today's competitive world?
Well, if you really think about it, like everyone in the world is really in sales. And here's what I mean by that. Even if you don't get paid a commission, right? Like even if you don't have a sales job, you're still out there every day doing what? You're trying to persuade, you're trying to influence, you're trying to convince. You're in the business of what we call moving others. And we even call that non-sales selling. So let me give you a few different examples. Like obviously, if you're a salesperson, you're in sales. But let's say you're a business owner, because some business owners are like, I'm not in sales. No, you really are. Like if you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, and you're trying to get your employees to follow the vision of where you want to take your company, what are you trying to do? You're trying to persuade.
Yeah.
You're trying to influence.
Yeah.
You're trying to move others. On the flip side, let's say you're an employee, and it doesn't matter. You could be an operations employee or a finance employee or human resources, and you're trying to convince your boss to give you a pay raise. What are you trying to do? You're trying to persuade. You're trying to influence. You're trying to move others. I mean, if you're an attorney, you're trying to convince a jury of your peers that your client is innocent. What are you trying to do? You're trying to persuade. You're trying to influence. You're trying to move. So, I mean, I could go on and on. If you're a politician, trying to convince voters to vote for you. I hate to tell you, you're trying to persuade, you're trying to influence. If you're a teacher trying to convince your kids to do their homework, persuade, influence. Everything you do in this life and your success depends on your ability to persuade, influence, and move others. So we're all in sales now at this point. It doesn't really matter what you do.
Right. Even children are in sales when they want to influence their parents for something, right? You have kids?
Yeah. I mean, if you really think about it, and I'm not going to get religious here or anything, but like selling has been around since the history of mankind. Like if you read in what we have as like the biblical record, it talks about, before this world was made and everything and all that stuff, there was this great war in heaven, right? And a third of God's children were thrust out of heaven because they rejected God's plan, and then everybody else accepted God's plan, all that stuff. Now, when you think about war in heaven, was that a war in heaven with like tanks? Were they firing guns at each other, stabbing each other with swords? No, that was a war of persuasion. That
Wow.
was a war of influence.
Mhm.
It was a war of convincing and moving others. So, really, if you think about it, persuasion influence has been around since the dawn of mankind, whenever that was. So it's kind of an interesting way to
Absolutely.
think about it.
Absolutely. And now that we know how important sales influence and all of that is in your life, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you're seeing out there with salespeople, entrepreneurs when they're
Yeah.
trying to sell?
I mean, there's a lot of mistakes, but I would say one of the biggest mistakes that we see entrepreneurs and salespeople make over and over and over is that when they're trying to sell something, I mean, they believe in their product and their service that they have the best and they're the number one market leader, and they come across to the average prospect as way too enthusiastic. Now, I don't mean be boring, but they
Yeah,
come across too excited, all right, and they try to jump into their solution too early in the conversation. Now, when I say that at events, sometimes people are like, oh, I've always been taught I have to be excited about what I sell. And I agree with you, but you
right.
have to keep the excitement to yourself. You have to keep that internal, because the
Right,
moment the prospect feels that you are just trying to sell them something because you're excited about it, is the
yeah,
moment they emotionally shut down and stay service. It's like if you go to like a used car dealership, and we train tons of used car salespeople in dealerships. So no pun intended, but that's kind of the whole view like pushy salesperson comes from. And let's
right,
say the salesperson's really, really excited you're there. And like, we've got the greatest we've got the greatest cars, we've got the greatest deals, and they start going on and on and on. What do you typically do? Oh, just looking
right,
around. Like, you
exactly.
try to protect yourself because you can feel the commission breath from a mile away. You don't want to have that same commission breath. One thing that we all have to understand, this is just kind of human behavior 101, typically within like the first 7 to 12 seconds of any sales conversation you're in. Okay. I don't care if you sell B2C, B2B, door to door, in a home, in an office, on the phone, on Zoom, it doesn't matter. Your prospects subconsciously, we can't even help it as a human being, are picking up on your verbal and nonverbal cues based on what you are saying and or asking, that triggers their brain to react in one of two ways. That is scary if we don't understand that. React in one of two ways. If you come across aggressive or like overly excited, okay, or if you come across needy, everybody knows what I say about that. I know all of you have been on sales calls or talk with people about something they're trying to sell, and you feel needy. If you
Right,
feel needy, you feel they're going to feel that you feel needy like times 10 what you feel. I can promise you that. So when you come across aggressive, needy, and especially attached, and you don't understand the right questions to ask, you don't understand the right tone, it triggers their brain to go into what's called fight or flight mode. Now,
right,
everybody's heard of fight or flight mode, but a lot of people don't understand that that is a triggered reaction based off you, not them. It's not like that prospect, you know, got up in the morning, they're like, you know what? When that lady calls me for that appointment I have, when she asks me that fourth question, I think I'm going to go into fight or flight mode and say, enough with the questions. Just tell me how much it's going to cost, and I'll tell you if I'm interested. It's not like they got up thinking that. That is a reaction based off your tonality, based off how you sound. It's based off your questioning that triggered her to go into fight or flight mode, where they say, I'm too busy. Can you call me back later? Or we don't need it if you're on a cold call. Or we already have somebody for that. Or, we don't have the money for that early on. Or I'm good, get to the point. Or, how much is this going to cost? And I'll tell you if I'm interested. Or can you send me some information? These are all triggered reactions coming from us that we can control once we learn the right skills. Now, once you learn how to come across what we would say more neutral. And what I mean by neutral, I mean more unbiased. Like, you're not quite sure you can even help yet. You don't know enough information. You don't have to say that, but you're coming across that way. Okay. So when we come across more collective, say more relaxed, and especially here's the key word, detached, we understand the right questions to ask. We understand how to use our tone. The prospect becomes curious enough where they want to engage. They
Right.
want to open up to you because they feel like you might have something important to them. Now, they might not understand what it is yet, but you come across differently. It causes them to relax. It causes them to, what we say, let their guard down. Is it easier to sell when your prospect's guard is completely down
Of
or when
course.
their guard is up the whole time?
Yeah, of course it
I,
is.
I, yeah, I think we know the answer to that. So we have to learn, and this is the same we always say, how to become really more detached from trying to force the sale and really try to understand what their problems are and how can we help them. Now, like I said, do I mean when you get on sales calls, it's not your goal to make sales or move the sale along? No, of course not, right? But what I do mean is you have to keep that internal. You have to keep that to yourself because like I mentioned earlier, if they start to pick up on certain things you're saying, or if you sound scripted, right? You don't sound natural. That's the moment they emotionally shut down. And even when you ask pretty good questions, that's when they start giving you very vague answers, very generalized, or 3 or 4 word answers. And you know, when they stay surface level, most of that conversation, you know, you're going to get tons of objections at the end. We can't afford it. I need to think it over. I need to do more research. That's all triggered based off your lack of sales ability. Make
Wow.
sense?
That totally makes sense. And I really feel like I can learn so much from you for having made mistakes in the past. And I
Sure.
think if you come at it more from like a curiosity standpoint about them, then
Mm.
they'll be more interested. And then do you then try to sell them on 1 call, 2 calls, 3 calls?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your industry. Like if you're in B2C sales, most B2C sales, not all, there's exceptions, but most B2C sales is a 1 call close, maybe a 2 call close if it's more of a pricier product or service, but
Yeah.
most of the time it's a 1 call close. Now, if you're in B2B sales, it's a little bit different if you sell SMB to like small businesses that maybe like a laundromat on the corner with one owner compared to if you're selling enterprise, like a Fortune 1000 or 500 or 100 company. Typically, if you're selling SMB, you know, it depends on what you're selling, but there's typically a first call discovery. You know, maybe the next call is a demo. It depends on what you sell. Could be a next step meeting with the department head, next step meeting with the board if you're selling more enterprise. So it really depends on, you know, if you're in B2C sales compared to B2B, and in B2B if you're selling to more SMB type of companies rather than enterprise.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And being that you have these fabulous track records, I want to talk about your methodology. What is NEPQ? And can you go over what that is and how's it different compared to what
Yeah,
I
NEPQ stands for neuro emotional persuasion questioning, and it might help everybody if I kind of broke it down to kind of like kind of what okay, so let me break down. This is probably easier. So according to like behavioral science, there are actually 3 forms of communication. All right. And everybody listening, I'd suggest you write these down because once you understand the differences in persuasion and where you are now compared to where you could be, even if you're already doing well, it can change everything for you. You make double, triple what you're making now. And I don't care if you already make 2 or 300,000 a year in commissions as a salesperson. Okay. Or if you're a business owner and your sales are going good, how do you get to the next level? How do you go up 2 or 3 levels above that if they keep saying and asking the same questions? So the first mode of communication, let me ask you this. If I asked you this question, Lisa, if I asked you what's the first image that comes to your mind when I say the words boiler room selling, what would that be? What's the first image that comes to your mind?
like some bad movie, maybe where
Right, like Gordon Gecko, Wolf on Wall Street. Hey, I got a great opportunity for you. Then we push and pressure and tell them why we have the number one this and we're the best this and why they need to go with us. And we push and we pressure. That's known as era one type of selling. Because I'm not going to give you the scientific term. That's boring. But era one, write this down, boiler room selling. Okay. So according to the data, we're the least persuasive when we tell people things, or we attempt to dominate them or posture them or manipulate them or push them into something we want them to do, right? Let me give you a few examples of the least persuasive way to sell. We're all taught that you have to have an amazing presentation, right? Show them how great your products or services are. You got the 60-minute slide deck. Here's our corporate offices. Here's the pictures of our founders. Here's all of our customer service awards. Here's our AAA rating with the Better Business Bureau. We have the best this. We're the number one market leader for that. Which, by the way, doesn't every single salesperson or company say they're the number one market leader or the number one product or service in the industry?
yes, I've done it. It's backed by nothing. I get it.
Everybody does it, right? So when you do it, when you say those type of things, it's not like you have salespeople that come up to you and say, yeah, Lisa, we're the 6th best service in the industry. Nobody says that, right? Now, I'm not saying you have to say that. But if you start saying we're the number one this, we're the number one that, just so everybody knows, your prospects actually trust you less when
Right.
you say things like that or you talk down about your competitors. And why? Because they're used to every single salesperson who's ever sold them anything saying what? We're the number one this. We have the best this. So it just literally goes in one ear out the other. Okay. So according to the data, your presentation is not very persuasive if it's more than 10% of your entire sales process or conversation. And that's the problem, because in every industry, we train 158 different industries. Okay. In 158 industries, the average salesperson presents in pretty much every industry about 50% of the time. We have to get that down to about 10%. That's a whole nother training. All right. Telling your story. Hate to tell everybody, nobody cares about your story when you're selling one-to-one. Whose story do they care about? Their story, right? Giving a sales pitch. How many of you are guilty of giving a pitch? You hear a problem, you ask a couple questions. What keeps you awake at night? What's two problems you have? They tell you, oh, let me tell you how we solve that. And you go into your sales pitch. Okay, no bueno. It's not very persuasive. Okay, assuming the sale is a big one. According to the data, very low on the persuasion poll, especially if you try to assume the sale early in the conversation when you have zero trust or credibility. That triggers a lot of sales resistance. Okay, especially if you're in more of a complex sound environment that requires more than one or two calls or touches. Right, so that's the first mode in a nutshell. Now, the second mode is more known as like consultative selling. Everybody's heard of that, right? Consultative selling came out in the late 70s, early 80s with methodologies like Sandler Institute, which was revolutionary at that time. Spin selling, Neil Rackham, college professor, never sold anything, by the way, but they taught that you needed to ask logical-based questions to find the needs of the client. But what's a potential downfall when you only ask logical-based questions? Your prospects are going to, we call those surface level questions. What type of answers is your prospect going to?
No, open-ended questions would be better, right?
Well, yeah, and it really depends on your tone when you ask them, right? Because you can have great questions, but the way you ask them, like if your prospect feels you're just reading from a script or it's like a sales question, they're not going to open up just from a good question. So it's how we use our tone, which I can give you a few examples here in a minute if you want. But what's the problem with only asking logical-based surface level questions, like you mentioned, is your prospects are going to give you surface level logical-based answers back.
Right.
The human beings make buying decisions off logic or emotion.
Motion.
100% emotion. Let me even give an example of this, because we'll come in and we'll train like, Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies are in like B2B sales, long, complex sound environments. And they're like, emotion does not work in B2B sales. I sell XYZ unique product and my prospects will never get emotional. It's all about the facts and numbers and how they make their decisions. And I'm like, that is so interesting, because the way the brain works, let me give you an example of this. Okay. The way the brain works, there's been studies with people that have been injured in the military, like in wars and stuff. And let's say they had a brain injury. Well, there's a certain part of your brain, I won't give you guys a scientific term of it. There's a certain part of your brain where all of your emotions are at. And when that part of the brain becomes damaged and you have no emotions, guess what's happened? Guess what happens? You can't even go to the bathroom.
Wow.
You can't tie your shoes. You can barely talk, because everything you do and decisions you make to go to the bathroom is predicated on your emotional side of your brain, not the logic. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to take numbers into factor, but at the end of the day, they're going to make the decision based on their emotions, because you cannot make a decision without your emotional part of the brain. When those people get brain injuries and they have no emotions, they can't even go to the bathroom. They can't decide if they can tie their shoe. So if they can't even go to the bathroom and decide to tie the shoe, obviously your emotions are a part of the buying process.
Right.
When I say that to people, like, oh, I had no idea. Yeah, your emotion part of your brain is the one that makes the decision to even tie your shoe or go to the bathroom or go down the hallway or go left or right. Everything is predicated on that emotional part of your brain working. If it doesn't work, you're pretty much a vegetable. It's crazy. All right. All right. So hopefully that lets everybody know what that. Okay. Now that's the second form of communication. It's more persuasive than boiler room selling, manipulate them, pressure them, but you're still having to play the numbers game, because very little emotion is brought out by simply asking logical based surface level questions. Okay. Third mode. Let's get into the fun stuff. Third mode of communication, the most persuasive according to behavioral science, is what's called dialogue. So we're the most persuasive when we allow others to persuade themselves, when we ask what are called neuro-emotional persuasion questions. Okay, now the question everybody asks me, how do I get a human being to persuade themselves? That's the $1 trillion question, right? Can you just get in front of them and be like, hey, Lisa, go ahead and persuade yourself. And by the way, here's our wire details. Obviously not, right?
Yeah.
So you have to learn, okay, certain skilled questions, when and how to ask those questions. Now, what do I mean by when and how to ask the question? See, there's certain questions in your sales process that have to be asked more in a curious tone. Okay. And Lisa, tell me, like, what industry do you come from? Like, what do you sell in the past? I don't even know.
Well, a million moons ago, I was a health club salesperson when I lived back in New York, and
Okay.
Since then I've had a lot of different iterations.
What is your business now?
Now I'm a high performance coach for executives, but I have a huge
Okay.
background in health and wellness.
Yeah. So like health and fitness, losing weight, those type of things.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's my where I came from. That's like my
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I was going to give you an example for that industry because you're trained thousands in that industry too. Health and fitness, losing weights, supplements, just everything, the whole meal plans. We train a ton of people in that space. So one of my first situation questions might be, now I want you to hear my tone, what it sounds like. John, can you walk me through, like, what are you doing now to try to lose this weight? See, that's a curious tone, right? Now, there's other questions in my sales process that require more of a skeptical or challenging tone. Now, I'm not going to use a skeptical or challenging tone the first couple minutes of a conversation because I don't have much trust or credibility yet. But towards the middle to the end, I might ask what's called a consequence question that gets the prospect to think about the consequences of what happens if they don't do anything. Right. So let's say in this example, this gentleman, let's say that you're talking to a gentleman that wants to lose, let's say 100 pounds. Let's say he's in his mid 50s or early 50s. He's got a daughter that's growing up. He wants to lose the weight because he wants to walk her down the aisle. He wants to see his grandkids grow up. I'm just saying that that's the problem you find. Right. Okay. So I'm going to tie that into the consequence question. Okay, but John, what happens if you don't do anything about this and you don't lose that 90 pounds? Like, what happens at that point? Okay, so that's a consequence question. Now, my tone was more of a challenging or skeptical tone there. Now, I'm not asking that question the first couple minutes, but maybe 15 minutes in, I have more credibility and trust. I built more of a gap that, okay, but what happens if you don't do anything about this and you end up not losing the weight? Like, what happens with your daughter then? See, that gets him to internalize and feel the consequences if he doesn't do anything about losing the weight. Okay, but that's more of a skeptical challenging note. Now, there's other parts of that sales conversation where I have to ask more of a concern tone, like a tone that shows more empathy. So let's say they have some type of concern. You can't help them overcome it. Like, I want to think it over. You don't know how to help them overcome it, which we can teach you that, but this is a whole other conversation. I might lean in and say, Amy, what's really holding you back from moving forward so you can lose the weight? What's really holding you back from moving forward so you can lose the weight? See how my tone completely shifts into more of a concern tone? Yeah. So the way I use my tone causes the prospect to interpret the meaning behind each question. So our tone is the way your prospect interprets what's behind your question. If they feel you're asking it because you're curious or you're concerned for them, they open up. They go below the surface. Okay. But if they feel the question is just another sales question on your script because you sound scripted, they emotionally close down most of the time, unless they're a lay down. Does that make sense? That makes sense that the tone is so important. Oh, it's huge. If your tone's off, that's why you guys are losing a lot of sales that you could be making for sure.
Wow. Okay. Well, I know I'm taking up a lot of your time and you're giving away a lot of your special secrets, but do you want to just help our audience with one last question about how they can be unstoppable when it comes to people that are saying these objections?
Well, you want to acquire skills that work with human behavior rather than work against it. So, a good place for them to start, we'll give them some free hors d'oeuvres, some little nibbles in the beginning. So they're welcome to join one of our free Facebook groups. I think we gave you the link. Just have them go to salesrevolution.pro. So salesrevolution.pro. I think there's about 56,000 members in there. They're entrepreneurs. coaches, consultants, salespeople from all sorts of industry, probably many of the industries that are listening to us right now. And we go live in that Facebook group 2 to 3 times a week with different Q&As, different subject matter trainings. And we'll do this right when they join, have them check their Facebook Messenger. Okay. And we'll have somebody on my team, one of my stunt doubles or surrogates, we'll message them over a free training. We'll give them the NEPQ 101 mini course, just a list of some different questions they can use for different situations they're in. So have them join that. And then if they want the new book, so the book just got published a couple weeks ago. It's a Wall Street Journal bestsellers, number 3 on their list. So really excited about that. But it's called The New Model of Selling to an Unsellable Generation. So have them go, if they want to purchase that book, I think it's at Barnes & Nobles for like 16, 18 bucks. Have them buy it online. Helps us if they buy it online. Okay. Instead of going to Amazon, it's the same price on Amazon anyways. Have them go to Barnes & Noble, because the more orders we get from Barnes & Noble's website, the more they stock their shelves with the book. Wow. So if you want to have this book, I put in a lot of stuff in here. So this is written with my co-author, Jerry Acuff. He's the CEO of Delta Point Consulting. Great guy, great sales trainer himself. And our biggest problem with sales books is we found most of it was just theory and just rehashed theory from like 100 years ago that doesn't really work that well anymore. Yeah. So what we wanted to do is make the book more tactical. So we included way more questions you can ask, how to use your tone, like, everything from connection questions to commitment or closing questions to like different objections and how to get them to overcome I want to think it over. Your price is too high. This is too expensive. We actually give you like real world examples from like tons of different industries in the book. So we put a lot of tactical training in this book. If they buy the book, they'll sell more for sure. So they're welcome to buy that from Barnes & Noble's website.
Thanks, Jeremy. I really appreciate all of the knowledge bombs. I hope you guys have been taking notes and you're run out and buy the book. I know for sure I will get it. And been a great guest on WholeCEO with Lisa G.
Thanks for having me on, Lisa. It was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming to WholeCEO with Lisa G. After over 20 years helping people lose weight and get fit, I'm so excited to announce that I found the missing link with my coaching. Message me if you want to learn how to look better, feel better, and go faster with a master. Lisa G at lisagfit.com.